The California sun blazed over Silicon Valley, a relentless golden hammer pounding down on the sprawling tech hub. The sky stretched wide, a deep blue canvas streaked with thin, wispy clouds that looked like they'd been brushed on by some distracted artist. Below, the streets buzzed with the hum of ambition electric cars gliding silently, delivery drones whirring overhead, and the faint chatter of startup dreams spilling from open cafe windows. Inside the sleek, glass-walled offices of Ing's scrappy startup clawing its way up the tech food chain, the air crackled with restless energy. Keyboards clacked like machine gun fire, coffee machines hissed in the break room, and the low drone of ceiling fans mingled with the murmur of engineers swapping ideas. We were building an AI chatbot meant to rewrite the rules of natural language processing, and I, Daniel, was right in the trenches, hunched over my desk, my screen glowing with endless lines of code. The office itself was a study in modern excess-polished concrete floors, ergonomic chairs that cost more than my rent, and massive windows that framed the valley like a postcard. My corner was a mess of sticky notes and half-empty coffee cups, a chaotic shrine to the grind. I'd been at it for hours, tweaking algorithms, chasing that elusive breakthrough. My fingers flew across the keyboard, the rhythm of it almost meditative. This wasn't just a job, it was my shot, my chance to prove I belonged among the brightest minds in tech. Not everyone shared my fire, though. Brian, the CEO's son and my team leader, strutted through the office like he owned the place, which, in a way, he did. His luxury watch, a gaudy hunk of metal with a leather strap that screamed old money, glinted under the fluorescent lights as he sauntered over. He leaned over my shoulder too close, his colonia sharp, overpriced musk invading my space. "Hey, Daniel," he drawled, his voice thick with mockery. "This code's a disaster, huh?" Bugs everywhere, as usual. My hand tightened around my mouse, the plastic creaking under the pressure. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck, but snapping back would only feed his ego. Brian thrived on getting under people's skin, wielding his daddy's title like a club. I forced my voice to stay calm, smooth as glass. "It's not bugged. It's test code for a new feature. Still in progress." He let out a laugh, sharp and grating, like nails on a chalkboard. "Test code's gotta be decent, man. You're always half-assing it, that's why it's trash." He straightened up, smirking, and flicked a speck of imaginary dust off his tailored blazer. The jab stung, a knife twisting in my gut, but I kept my face neutral. I knew my worth, even if he refused to see it. My team was a league of heavy hitters MIT grads, ex-Google engineers, people who'd written code that powered half the internet. I'd earned my spot among them, busting my ass day after day, stretching my limits just to keep up. Brian, though, he was a walking train wreck. His code was a sloppy mess of Eris logic, so tangled it crashed our tests, syntax so lazy it barely compiled. But no one dared call him out. One whispered to his father, and you'd be out the door, resume in hand, wondering what hit you. I swallowed the bitterness and turned back to my screen, letting the lines of code blur into focus. Then came the breakthrough. It was late past midnight, the office deserted except for the faint hum of my laptop and the distant whine of a janitor's vacuum down the hall. My eyes burned, my back ached, but there it was, an algorithm that could supercharge our chatbot's accuracy. It was elegant, efficient, a thing of beauty. My pulse hammered as I typed the final line, adrenaline flooding my system. This could change everything. The next morning, I pitched it to the team, my voice buzzing with excitement as I paced the conference room. The projector hummed, casting my slides onto the wall charts. Data, a roadmap to something revolutionary. "This algorithm cuts through the noise," I said, words tumbling out in a rush. "Faster responses, sharper context recognition, it's a game changer." "Hold up, Daniel," Brian interrupted, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. His tone dripped with fake curiosity, a predator playing with its food. "Sounds cool, but isn't it a little out there? You really think you can pull that off?" I opened my mouth to explain, to break it down step by step, but he barreled over me, puffing out his chest. Actually, I've been working on something better, simpler, more efficient. You'll see when I roll it out next week. My stomach plummeted, a cold weight settling in my chest. His idea was mine every word, every concept, parroted back with that smug grin plastered across his face. He'd stolen it right out of my mouth, bold as brass. That's my algorithm, I said, my voice tight, barely holding steady. You just heard me explain it. He laughed again, louder this time, leaning back like he didn't have a care in the world. Please, Daniel, with your skills, no way you cooked that up. I don't need to steal from you. My hands trembled, heat surging through me like a wildfire. He was lying brazenly, shamelessly, and everyone in the room knew it. But the silence was deafening. Heads stayed down, eyes fixed on laptops or coffee cups, no one willing to cross the CEO's golden boy. I couldn't let it stand. Later that day, I dug into his code hours, of sifting through his commits, my screen a maze of timestamps and edits. There it was, my variable names, my comments, my logic, copied line for line. It wasn't just theft. It was plagiarism so blatant it bordered on insulting. I cornered him by the coffee machine that afternoon, the office buzzing around us. Keeping my voice low but firm, I stepped into his space. This is my work, Brian. I've got evidence. You're not fooling me. His sneer deepened, eyes glinting with something dark, malicious. What, you mess with my stuff? Plant bugs to frame me? He leaned in, his breath hot with coffee and arrogance. Careful, Daniel. Keep pushing, and you'll regret it. The accusation hit like a punch, but I held my ground, rage simmering beneath my calm. I'm not letting this slide. I'll prove what you did. He stepped even closer, towering over me, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss. You want to quit? Or should I get Dad to kick you out? Your call. The threat hung there, heavy as the valley heat pressing against the windows. My heart pounded, but I didn't flinch. This wasn't over, it was war now, and I wasn't backing down. The standoff with Brian lingered like a bad taste, a constant itch under my skin as I moved through my days at INX. He swaggered around the office, untouchable, his laugh echoing down the halls while I kept my head down, burying myself in work. The tension between us was a live wire, sparking every time our paths crossed. But something else was shifting too slowly, quietly. The team started to notice me, really notice me. My focus, my grit, the way I showed up every day despite Brian's bullshit. In the break room, over the hiss of the espresso machine, I caught whispers of respect trailing me like a shadow. Daniel's the real deal, someone muttered once, pouring creamer into their mug. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. Then the bombshell dropped. INX scored a deal with a tech titan, a household name with deep pockets and deeper influence. The kind of partnership that could catapult us from scrappy startup to industry player overnight. The catch? They wanted a next-generation chatbot, and they wanted it fast, impossibly fast. The office turned into a pressure cooker, the air thick with nerves and caffeine fumes. Bet Brian's taking the lead. One of the QA guys grumbled over his coffee, stirring in sugar with a plastic spoon. CEO's kid, right? Born with the keys to the kingdom. My stomach twisted at the thought. Brian leading anything was a disaster waiting to happen. His ego would sink us before we even started. But when the announcement came, it wasn't his name that echoed through the room. Daniel, Brian said, striding into the meeting with that fake toothy grin of his. He clapped me on the shoulder, his grip too tight, his watch flashing under the lights. You're heading this one. I froze, my coffee cup halfway to my lips, the steam curling up into my face. Me? Yeah, you. He nodded, playing it up for the room, his voice dripping with mock sincerity. Best skills on the team. Perfect fit for the job. Bullshit. The word screamed in my head, loud and clear. His smile didn't reach his eyes, they were cold, calculating, watching me like a hawk. This wasn't a promotion. It was a setup, a trap wrapped in flattery. He was shoving an impossible project into my lap, banking on me to crash and burn under the weight of it. Refusing wasn't an option, not with the whole team staring, not with the CEO's shadow looming over everything. I set my cup down, the ceramic clinking against the table, and met his gaze. "Okay," I said, slow and deliberate. "I'm in." "Great," he replied, his grin widening, all teeth and no soul. "Don't screw it up. The pressure's all yours now." The sabotage kicked in almost immediately. First, he slashed the budget, cut it so deep I was left scrambling for basic tools, begging vendors for discounts just to keep my team equipped. Then came the deadline's absurd, suffocating timelines that piled up like bricks on my chest. Every meeting, he'd perch at the head of the table, arms crossed, smirking like a king watching a peasant squirm. "How's it going, Daniel?" he'd ask, voice smooth as silk. "Keeping up with the pace?" I'd nod, jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached, and push through. He thought he had me cornered, a mouse in his maze, but he'd underestimated me. I wasn't some pushover he could break. I'd play his game, sure, but I'd rewrite the rules while I was at it. Late that night, the office was a ghost town, the only light spilling from my desk lamp onto a sprawl of notebooks and energy drink cans. My eyes stung from staring at the screen, but my mind was racing. I grabbed a marker and started sketching it out on the whiteboard arrows. Timelines, a battle plan. Beat him at his own game. Deliver something so damn good he'd choke on it. Step 1. Outsmart the bastard. Step 2. Build something unstoppable. I capped the marker, staring at the chaos of my plan, and felt a flicker of something fierce hope maybe, or just pure defiance. Either way, I was ready. Brian's traps tightened around me every day, a vice squeezing harder with each passing hour. The stress was a living thing, gnawing at my edges late nights, bleeding into early mornings, my reflection in the bathroom mirror showing a man I barely recognized. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, my jaw locked tight, stubble creeping across my chin. "Not breaking," I muttered, splashing cold water on my face, the shock of it jolting me awake. Not yet. His strategy was textbook sabotage. Drown me in workload, starve my resources, set deadlines so brutal they laughed in the face of reason. He wanted me humiliated, my name dragged through the mud while he stood above it all, untarnished. But I wasn't going down without a fight. The idea hit me like a lightning strike, cutting through the haze of exhaustion. Flip his game over deliver, blow his mind, leave him scrambled. I couldn't just meet his deadlines. I had to shatter them, build something so fast and flawless he'd have no ammunition left. Traditional coding was too slow, too rigid. I needed speed, adaptability. Then it clicked. Agile methodology. Short sprints, constant iterations, user feedback baked into every step. It was risky as Helling Next had never run a project like this, but it could work. It would work. I pitched it to Brian the next day, sliding a stack of notes across his desk. The office smelled of burnt coffee and printer ink, the hum of conversation a dull roar behind us. "Agile development," I said, keeping my voice steady, unshaken. "It's leaner, faster. We'll hit your deadlines and then some." He squinted at the papers, skepticism curling his lip like he'd tasted something sour. "Agile? You've never run that here. Sounds like a stretch." Studied it inside out. I fired back, leaning forward. "It's our edge. We move quick, adapt on the fly better than anything you've got." He shrugged, a grudging tilt of his shoulders. "Fine, don't tank it. I'm not cleaning up your mess." With his reluctant nod, I hit the ground running. I pulled together a crew agile veterans I'd worked with before, people I trusted with my life. We set up shop in a quiet corner of the office after hours, the space ours alone once the day shift cleared out. The silence was broken only by the rapid tap of keys, the soft whir of cooling fans, and the occasional muttered curse as we wrestled with bugs. whiteboards filled up with scribbled workflows, sticky notes plastered everywhere like confetti. Brian thought he'd boxed me in, but we were flying sprints churning out progress at a pace he couldn't comprehend. The prototype landed like a grenade. We rolled it out to a test group, and the feedback hit like a tidal wave. This thing's alive, it gets me. Users couldn't stop raving, their comments flooding our inbox, lighting up social media. INX's chatbot is next level. One tweet read, racking up retweets by the hour. The office buzzed with it, the energy electric. Brian's face when he saw the numbers. Priceless, a flash of shock melting into a scowl, his jaw twitching like he'd bitten into something bitter. He hadn't seen me coming, not even close. But I knew him too well to celebrate yet. One win wouldn't stop him, he'd dig in deeper, fight dirtier. I braced myself for the counterattack, already planning my next move. The project's success lifted me like a wave, carrying me through the halls of INX on a current of quiet triumph. The team's vibe shifted where nods turned to fist bumps, voices calling out, "Hell of a job, Daniel," as I passed. The break room chatter was alive with it, people grinning over their coffee, tossing me props like I'd pulled off a miracle. Maybe I had, but Brian? He wasn't about to let it lie. Team effort. He'd snap whenever someone praised me, his voice sharp-edged, venom dripping from every syllable. "Don't think you're hot shit, Daniel." He went low, spreading whispers that I was an ego-tripping lone wolf, too arrogant to collaborate. Then the real dirt started. I'd catch him tweaking my code late at night, subtle edits that turned demos into disasters. One morning, the chatbot glitched hard mid-test, spitting out gibberish random strings of nonsense that had the QA team scrambling. Brian pounced, arms crossed, leaning against the wall with a smug grin. "Your bug, Daniel. Fix it or we're screwed." I traced it in under an hour. His fingerprints were all over it, clumsy edits buried in the logs meant to tank me. He'd overplayed his hand this time. I'd been meticulous, logging everything. Timestamps, backups, every change he'd slipped in. The evidence was ironclad, a dossier of his sabotage stacked neatly in my hands. I confronted him in his office, the door clicking shut behind me. The space reeked of privileged leather chair, mahogany desk, a framed photo of him and his dad grinning at some gala. I kept my voice calm, controlled, laying the papers out like a poker hand. "You did this, Brian. Planted the bugs. I've got proof dates, times, your commits." He barked a laugh, harsh and hollow, leaning back in his chair. "You're delusional. Maybe this gig's too big for you cracking under the pressure?" I didn't blink. "Enough. I'm taking this to your dad." I marched straight to the CEO's corner office, all polished wood and floor-to-ceiling windows framing the valley's golden sprawl. "Sir," I said, spreading the files across his desk. "Brian's sabotaging me. Here's the data code logs, everything." The CEO, his father, barely glanced at it, his jaw tightening into a hard line. "My son wouldn't do that. He's brilliant. You're wrong, Daniel." "Check it yourself," I pressed, voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through me. "Or I'll take this public. INX deserves the truth." His eyes flared, a storm brewing behind them. "You're done here," he snapped, jabbing a finger toward the door. "Out. Now." I walked, my pulse hammering in my ears, the door slamming shut with a finality that echoed down the hall. They'd chosen blood over facts, loyalty over evidence. Fine, I'd hit them where it hurt. That night, holed up in my apartment with the blinds drawn, I leaked it all to a tech blog. Emails, code logs, screenshots, the whole damn story. The post went live at midnight, and by morning it was everywhere, headlines screaming, "INX exec caught in sabotage scandal." Twitter with the fallout. Brian was axed within days, his dad stepping down under the pressure as the board scrambled to save face. Victory tasted sharp, bitter. I was jobless, blacklisted by the Valley's whisper network, too hot to touch, too risky to hire. but I'd stood up, drawn a line in the sand, and won. That had to be enough. Silicon Valley shimmered under that endless sky, a glittering sprawl of glass towers and impossible dreams. I stood outside INX one last time, the building's sleek facade catching the afternoon light. A twinge of loss tugged at me. Months of my life poured into that place. Sweat and sleepless nights etched into its walls. But pride drowned it out. I'd fought the fight, taken down the rot, and walked away with my head high. Work dried up fast after that. Whistleblower was a death sentence. Here HR emails stopped coming, calls went unreturned. The valley didn't forgive those who rocked the boat, no matter how righteous the cause. I spent weeks pacing my apartment, the hum of the fridge my only company, wondering if I'd torched my career for good. But I wasn't wired to quit. I never had been. Then it hit me. Why beg for a seat at someone else's table when I could build my own? I scraped together every dollar I had left, called up engineers I'd bled with at INX, people who'd seen the truth and stuck by me, and we started something new. Our mission was simple but bold. AI that mattered. Tools for poverty alleviation, sustainability, real problems, not just another chatbot for rich companies to flaunt. No corporate games, no backstabbing, just impact. Our first office was a shoebox of cramped rental on the edge of the valley, with flickering lights and a coffee maker that groaned like it was dying. But the view through the smudged window, those twinkling valley lights stretching into the dusk, felt like a promise. I stood there on our first night, the team sprawled around a folding table littered with laptops and takeout boxes. No bullshit here, I said, half to myself, half to them. We'll do this right. Change things, really change them. They nodded, eyes bright with the same fire I felt. The path ahead was murky, steep as hell, littered with obstacles I couldn't even name yet. But I'd learned something at INX. Fight the rot, whatever it takes. Call it out, tear it down, build something better in its place. With that, I turned from the window, cracked my knuckles, and got to work.